Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. I think Lyft had a special Valentine's Day present for the Bears last night when they announced something that was 10 times bigger than their actual projected revenue. But, what did Yogi Berra say? There's lies, there's damn lies, there's statistics, and then there's CFOs. Bang! Now, our producer tells me, Pete, that I can't say CFOs lie. So I was just saying that some of them stretch the truth, and some of them have no idea that 500 basis points is different than 50 basis points until the stock jumps 65% in the after hours by everybody going, holy crap, they're going to earn that much?
Well, anytime you can have a Yogi Berra quote, John, it's worthwhile. So, one of the greats, one of the all-time greats for sure. But a lot of weird stuff going on in the markets. And yesterday, John, we witnessed a pretty good sell-off. Today, trying to bounce and hold a little bit, but not doing as well as we were at the start of the day. That's for sure. As we get to the midday, now all of a sudden a little bit of angst is in the air.
Yeah, and he, by the way, folks, is Pete Najarian. I'm Jon Najarian. This is the Rebel's Edge. Jared Wenkman is handling all the difficult tasks of our voices, the view, as well as all the stuff that's running down this side of the page, Pete, all of the topics and so forth. But let's dive right into Macro Minute, Pete.
Let's do it.
A lot of financial shows, at least they call themselves financial shows, they're really more like hush puppies, and not the shoes, but the thing that you get at the all-you-can-eat place that's supposed to fill you up so you don't eat the expensive shrimp. We give you the expensive shrimp. But, I mean, oh my gosh, Pete, today, Austin Goolsbee, this clown, who, was a University of Chicago teacher. He was also president of the Council of Economic Advisors under Obama, and now he's the Chicago Fed president. He said, don't get all amped up about one hot CPI print. I seem to remember him getting all jazzed up, Pete, whenever we have a low CPI print, basically saying, that's it. The Fed's done. We've done our job. Everything's hunky-dory. But one hot print, and he says, just ignore that.
It is amazing how they can twist it so quickly, isn't it, John? I'll just say real briefly, you're right. We're looking at the Fed still, but a little bit of the eye is getting cast back over towards earnings. And I think that's why this morning we had that nice bump, at least early. Now, can we hold on to that? Time will tell. We're not seeing it in the Dow, which has flipped around a little bit, but we are still holding up decently in the NASDAQ. So I think from a macro standpoint, I'm just going to say we're sliding from that CPI a little bit closer to a focus back on earnings. But that CPI number is certainly something that people are concerned about.
Well, and then, Pete, we have fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
Well, fantastic futures are certainly fantastic if you had Bitcoin or a number of other altcoins that are moving up with the Bitcoin surge. Broke 50,000, broke 51,000. Pete, in the Asian market overnight, it touched 52,000.
Yeah.
But right now it's about 51,600. So that is going to be my fantastic futures. And by the way, those futures do trade at the CME, among other places, Pete.
Yep. And Terry Duffy and those guys doing a magnificent job over there. I'm going to just talk about from the futures part of it all, John. How about the VIX? I mean, we talk about volatility all the time. We talk about some of the movements that we see in the markets and so forth. Friday, it was 13. Monday, it was 14. Tuesday, it hit 18. And today, we're back somewhere closer to the 14. So it's something I think we all should be very well aware of at all times. And I think we were seeing a little bit of that today, where I saw at least some out there taking advantage of this big spike that we've had. Now, I say take advantage. It doesn't mean it's over, but those pops up towards 17, 18, I think there were some folks out there that were using some of that higher volatility to kind of manipulate themselves into some positions going into in a little bit further out in time.
Certainly, it is good to see people actually paying attention to what some of the market inputs are, Pete.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Robinhood, who robbed from the rich and gave to the poor, allegedly. Well, Robinhood itself has been pretty poor in terms of performance, Pete, but the stock was up pretty strong today. Trading activity rebounded. Monthly active users, or MAUs, have definitely exceeded expectations. And that's a good thing for trading in general, but obviously for Robinhood and anybody who happens to own that stock.
They hit 52-week highs. John, you already nailed it with the MAUs. I mean, that was a beat. They beat expectations by a lot. And then you look at deposit growth, that was strong. Earnings beat, revenue beat. So they no longer at a loss. They actually had earnings of 3 cents. So when we look at this report, there's a good reason why this stock's at 52-week highs today, or at least hit 52-week highs today. By the way, first 90 minutes, 40 million shares traded, John. An average day trades a total of 14. So they did 40 million in the first 90 minutes. Pretty busy day going on there. There are some shorts, not huge, 3-4%, but enough where you could understand why it hit 52-week highs based upon that. And they do have a pristine balance sheet. When you take a look at that sometime, take a look at that, because they can weather some storms along the way as well.
Yeah, well, and they're pushing ever closer, Pete, to profitability.
Yeah.
But they've been around a long time, and they're really not printing a lot of money. That's why it's a $13 stock, I guess, Pete. Yeah. Even though right after the IPO, I think you and I remember it in the 40s.
Yeah.
And it's not anywhere near the 40s right now.
No.
All right. How about Lyft? Lyft is the one we were making fun of because the chief financial officer, Aaron Brewer, had to clarify the difference between 500 basis points and 50 basis points, because she said that the actual increase was going to be 500 bips. And in fact, it's going to be 50. That's why the stock spiked 65% in the after hours last night. Now, I gave most of that back, Pete, but what I will say is anybody that followed our work on Lyft, they had a very nice lift, even though it's not 65%. It's still double-digit gain. And that typo did cause Lyft to reverse, of course, from that 65% gain. But we had unusual option activity in it, Pete. We talked about it on the show, and there it is. 1554 was what Lyft hit today. It was up 28%. So the right to buy it at 12 when it's trading nearly 16, yeah, it's more than a double. Bang!
Well, and when you get up to those 52-week highs and you're looking close to 17, not quite 17, John, that's a heck of a move. It's a heck of a lift to the upside. They did everything you'd ever want, right? I mean, I know they had the mishap early on, but let's forget that for a minute. They crushed the earnings, highest ever ridership that they've had. Their gross bookings forecast was a beat. So there was no numbers in this that looked bad. Matter of fact, last I looked, it was around up maybe 30, 31%, something like that, close to us coming on air. But you can understand why. When you look at the earnings at 18 cents versus the 8 cents they'd had in the past, they have done, or was estimated to be, they have done a really, really good job of competing. And who are they competing with? Of course, Uber, who also has been doing extremely well when you take a look. Take a look at those two stocks. They're the magnificent two, apparently, John, because there's, you got your 7, you got your 5, you got your 15. They're the two, because they're in the same business and they're both doing very, very well.
It was a great quarter for them, Pete. And by the way, if you would like to check out any of our offerings as far as the scans that we do for unusual activity, go to marketrebellion.com/get started. That's marketrebellion.com/get started. All right, now we're going to talk about QuidelOrtho, Pete, because QuidelOrtho tanked. They're a provider of in vitro diagnostic technologies. That's what the website says. We haven't talked about this one a lot, but you know what? When your revenues are down 14%, that's not a good thing. When your year over year Q4 comes in about 50 mil almost under estimates, that's not a good thing. And then JP Morgan, Pete, they slashed their price target from 66 to 37. Ouch.
That's a big ouch. They also downgraded them. So they did everything, obviously, post earnings and going through the report, but they had been doing relatively well, John, but the stock getting hit by what, 30+% to the downside today? That's a pretty ugly hit, understandable. And you pointed out that the revenue being down 14% year over year, that's never a good thing. Diagnostic companies have generally been doing relatively well, but not everybody in healthcare is the same, and everything gets a little bit different. They do have some pretty decent sized shorts in here, so those shorts might start wanting to cover pretty soon as the stock hit 52-week lows earlier today. There's a heck of a lot of debt in this company, John. They do have some free cash flow that's decent, but when you're looking at $2.5 billion in debt, there's a lot of reasons why I think that some of the analysts maybe should have kind of backed off a little bit before the earnings and said, hey, look, this thing's maybe a little stretched, and probably the possibility of any kind of weakness would be something that maybe you'd want to be in front of. But nobody did it. And now you're seeing the fruits of that whole thing, because that's a huge slash, as you mentioned, from JP Morgan analyst.
Yeah, she didn't like it at all, Pete. And she cited a whole bunch of reasons that the show would run another 30 minutes if we had to cite them all. All right, let's talk for a second, Pete, about what's going on with Upstart. Now, Upstart, it's going to be a company that not everybody can wrap their head around. But if you think of it, it's cloud-based and it's artificial intelligence. Those are two big buzzwords. But what do? They lend money to people. So instead of having a bunch of bankers go over the numbers, apparently they just have the artificial intelligence help them through the cloud figure out, okay, this is a good loan, or nope, we're not going to lend money to this guy, or whatever. Anyway, they are another one that had their revenue go down, Pete. And their year over year, they did 140 mil versus 134. That's good as far as the beating the estimate, but not good year over year. And I didn't see a lot that was good in this report. It just keeps getting worse on the trading side, Pete. It was down 10%, then it was down 15% an hour later, and now it's down over 20.
Yeah, last I looked, it was down about 20% or so, John. This is one, and I bring this up all the time because I think people have to always acknowledge and at least know a little something about these stocks, and when you're using options or stocks to move around in the markets. But you better know this is a name that a lot of folks have determined, obviously a lot of folks have determined has some weakness, and that weakness lies in what could potentially go wrong. And the reason I say that is, John, they're 34 to 40%, somewhere in that bracket, short interest here. So there is a lot betting against this company, and they haven't really covered yet. Maybe they will today. Who knows? Maybe at least some might cover. But for now, that's a massive short. And when you look at this thing, and you were talking about it, the revenue being down about 4% year over year, that's not good. Here's the thing that really was the worst that I heard. Loans down 19% year over year.
Ouch.
That's what they do. They can't do that, John. And if they do, and they did, and they report it, that's why you're seeing this stock down as much as it is. It's an ugly day for them. This is a stock that a lot of people have liked. A lot of very smart analysts fell in love with it early. But I'll tell you, it's been a really, really difficult path for them for a while now. And I think it's going to continue if they continue with the same sort of a loan decrease like we've seen over the last year.
Yeah, it's I've never really embraced this one, Pete. It's not that they can't do it. It's not that SoFi can't do it, but neither one has really broken out significantly, despite having a lot less of the overhead that traditional banks had. Neither one has really, impressed me, but I have traded SoFi. I've not traded this one. Yeah. All right, let's get into the sports, Pete. What is Red Zone Sports looking at today?
Well, do we want to catch this clip that you got up there?
Yeah, let's do that.
I love this. Yeah.
Let's take a look at this one, folks. Seems like nobody touched that guy, Pete.
kind of a problem when your right tackle doesn't block anybody.
Yeah, the right tackle for some reason slides to the outside, knowing that there is a guy directly in front of him. Well, folks, that was a clip from the Super Bowl. We know some of you listening through Podcast One and other podcasting services can't really see what we're showing to people that can see the full video, but the offensive tackle, the right tackle for San Francisco, for some inexplicable reason, slid to the outside, where there was already a blocker handling the defensive end. Now, I have no idea why he would do that, Pete, because literally he leaves unimpeded one of the beasts in Kansas City's defense, Chris Jones, a straight path to Purdy. And he's got like 3 steps. He's going to hit him on the 3rd step, and Purdy's got to get rid of the ball. So, like you say, he couldn't even see Ayuk.
Yeah, and you know, John, you got to give some of it to the genius of Kansas City, because throughout the game, if somebody watches it as crazy as I do, there were multiple times during the game where there were 2 defensive linemen on the field for Kansas City, because San Francisco completely gave up on the run with McCaffrey. And so they were going for the passing plays, right? Now they only have 2 defensive linemen. They've got linebackers and safeties all coming in from different angles and stacking it all up with 5 or 6 players on the other side of the offensive line. The offensive line doesn't know who to block. And that was the problem. They couldn't figure out who exactly. They know the 2 defensive linemen, they're going to probably come. But they don't know which safety, which linebacker, which what is going to actually finish it off. So it becomes a very, very complex thing for the offense. And that was great coaching by the defensive coordinator of Kansas City. We talked about him yesterday. Brilliant guy, did a great job. And if anybody wants to give Brock Purdy flack, he didn't have time to see Ayuk. He never even had a moment. He had to get rid of the ball as quick as he could, John. And that wasn't the only play. You and I saw a lot of plays like that. And on the flip side, we also saw Kansas City's offensive line. That right tackle, I think, led the team in tackles, because he was literally tackling guys that were coming in. And that, for the folks who don't understand that, offensive linemen can't tackle people. He might have led the Kansas City Chiefs in tackles on the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So,
Bosa, Pete, I can't believe that other than, of course, the NFL doesn't want to be embarrassed by saying, God, your officials suck. But they do. They suck. You're watching this. And so this play that we showed you guys, those of you who can see it, this play, he could have completed a touchdown pass. Purdy could have, to 2 receivers that were wide open. But again, his offensive lineman, even in a zone blocking scheme, should not have slid to the outside unless he had coverage, somebody else coming to the inside. Now, I can't imagine that you'd think you could do that, because that's more or less like a trap play, Pete, where the one offensive lineman moves and the defensive lineman, his eyes get as big as saucers and he's running straight ahead, and then bang, from the side, he gets taken out by the guard or the tight end or whatever it might be. There was no such play occurring here. And then, to your point, Pete, with Kansas City going for that touchdown to win the effing game, Bosa is held for a good 1.5 seconds, maybe 2 seconds. And then as he tries to scramble to the outside to keep Mahomes from being able to run to the end zone, he gets tackled, and instead Mahomes just pops the ball over, and the game's over. That was horrible officiating. If it was that way on both sides, I get it. But I remember that big guy, Trent Williams, getting 2 penalties in a row. And meanwhile, nobody from Kansas City's holding anybody. Nobody's tackling anybody. It was a joke. Liked the game, but hated the officiating.
Yep. And it's always too bad when they are, you hope for games that they aren't involved, to be honest with you. All right. So we're going to jump on to Rebel Sports. And to start it off, some of the records, John. The betting record, $185 million within the Nevada sports books. The previous record was set in 2022. So people are gambling a fair amount in the last couple of years. And this is another new record. TV ratings, 123.7 million viewers. It's the longest Super Bowl that was ever played. It had an overtime. 25-22 was the score for those who didn't really pay attention, with the Chiefs. At one point in time, John, 202.4 million people were watching the Super Bowl. We don't know exactly when. I didn't see that information, but that's another unbelievable number. So I guess the question I've got for you is this. Is KC lined up for a three-peat? Because they did it last year against Philly. They did it this year against San Francisco. What do you think? Are they going to be able to hold on to those players? Because Kelsey's going to be 1 year older, obviously. And Mahomes' age is probably not a big deal. But you start looking around and looking at some of the players and whatever, and those that are the biggest contributors. What do you think? Does Kansas City still sit there right away? And right now, would you speculate that they would win 3 in a row?
I think they have to be the odds-on favorite because of Mahomes. Not because of Travis Kelce, not because of Chris Jones, but because of Pat Mahomes.
Yeah.
The guy is just that good. And I don't know how you look at it any other way. He has, you talked about it, I think, yesterday, Pete, how he's blowing away the GOAT. Did you ever think anybody'd blow away Brady? Well, this kid's been in the league, 6 or 7 years now?
I think
Pete?
it's 7 now. Yeah.
7, and he's been to the Super Bowl, only lost once, won 3 times, 3 times total, 20, 23, and 24. I mean, he is the guy, and he put the team on his back in the second half, or they wouldn't be there. Even with the Zebras giving them every break, they wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for Pat Mahomes.
His decision-making is amazing. He and the head coach really obviously get along, which is why I think that everybody who thinks Andy Reid's going to walk away, I think they're probably wrong. I think he enjoys it too much now still, John. So I think you're right, too, by the way. When you look at it, there's a reason he's the MVP. When just the fourth quarter drive alone, he ran the ball when he needed to, and it was smart. He scrambled when he needed to, and that was smart, and then still was able to get those passes downfield. They just did a great job of doing what Kansas City does, right? And Pat Mahomes has been the guy leading that for a long time. All right, John, how about one more? UFL, and then we'll jump. Can it work? And I say that because of this. I actually played in one of these leagues, right? I played actually in the NFL, played in the CFL, and I also played in the World League of American Football. So I've played in leagues outside of the NFL. You have played with the NFL. The UFL originally, there was a UFL 2009 to 2012. The USFL tried 3 different times. The World Football League tried once in 1974-75. The XFL 2001, 2020, 2023. WLAF that I was part of the NFL Europe 91 through 07. But John, let me ask you this. So we've got the UFL, we got the Rock, you've got the USFL and the XFL coming together, and they're going to have some interesting matchups against one another, although they're all one now. But what do you think? Can the UFL, can these guys make money? The XFL, just as a number, last year lost $60 million on their, initial run for the first year. And the ratings started off pretty good, and then they kind of drifted lower. Is there room in spring for football? What do you think?
I think there is, Pete, but I think in order to get the buzz and the people, just like soccer, I mean, these days, soccer, it does fairly well, at least men's soccer. I know the Women's World Cup does well and might do well overseas. I don't know those numbers. But in soccer, when it started in the United States and they put professional teams like the Minnesota Kicks, which I remember, the tickets were super cheap. And I think they got to be super cheap because you got to build a fan base. Nobody knows these guys on TV. It's not the University of Georgia. It's not USC. It's not Alabama or Oklahoma. So there's a lot of kids on those teams that fans don't really know necessarily, but they know the entity. They don't know any of these entities, Pete. So you got to build a fan base. And quite frankly, when you and I were growing up, I remember walking into Raiders games because we grew up in the Bay Area, folks. if we went over to visit our grandmother on a Sunday, we'd walk into a Raiders game and they'd make you sit on the one side of the field where there was where the cameras were pointed at. The other side was completely empty. There was nobody on the other side of the field, but you got in for free.
Yeah.
We literally, especially in the second half, you walked in for free because they just wanted some bodies in the stands. I think they almost got to go there, Pete. I think it's got to be like a $5 to a $10 ticket. You don't need any of the skybox stuff or anything else. And they need to play in decent sized arenas, but not in, SoFi Stadium, for instance, or anything like that. Just, I'd say even small college stadiums while you build it up, because you don't need to see a whole bunch of empty seats. You turn that on, you're going to turn the channel.
Yeah, I think when I played in the World League of American Football, John, it was pretty fun because there were the mistakes where they had like Birmingham, huge stadium. There's no way you're going to fill that up. But for instance, with us, we played in Sacramento. It only holds about 20,000. So they could actually get people in there. And it looked pretty full, even if it wasn't. So I think you're right. They've got to have the right look, the right stadiums. Obviously, TV helps, but they've got to have some names. They do have names and coaches. Bobby Stoops, you got Todd Haley, you got Wade Phillips, Anthony Beck, Skip Holtz. So they've got some good names there. But I think somehow or another, John, they've got to be able to, maybe the NFL should work with them with certain players that they think that they want to kind of graduate from there over or something. Some names that, to your point, name recognition is a big deal. And that's what brings people in. But if it's a quarterback that nobody has ever heard of before, that makes it a lot more difficult, right? So there are some tweaks that they need to make. And I don't know if they're willing to make them. And maybe the NFL is not willing to make those either. But either way, I'm starting to get more and more onto the camp of I'm not sure spring football works.
Well, obviously the NFL is expanding its reach, Pete. They're going to play in Brazil next year, which is crazy, but they're going to play down in Brazil. Obviously, they've played in Germany. I don't know if they've played in France, but they've definitely played multiple times, multiple weeks this year in London. So, I think expansion is good for them. And eventually maybe there will be teams overseas that are part of the NFL or, beneath us to the south. But I think building a fan base is what this new league has to do first. So it's not a great get rich quick scheme. It's a get poor slowly scheme until you get enough people actually watching.
Yep. It's all about TV dollars. That's what they need. You're right.
Yep. Well, thanks for joining us, folks. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time. We encourage you guys to check out itsnotanoption.com, because if you go there, you can claim a free book. It's on us. Itsnotanoption.com. #1 business bestseller in 2024. Go check it out. Itsnotanoption.com. And then for you, it won't be an option to just trade stock anymore. At least you'll know that you could be making more money and taking less risk with options when you understand them. Itsnotanoption.com. See you tomorrow at 1, everybody.